Donald Trump has warned America will blow up Iran's strategically important Kharg Island if it refuses to make a deal. This small island is home to major oil facilities. So what is the significance of this land and what are the calculations being made on both sides? Jen Parker is an adjunct professor with the Defence and Security Institute at the University of Western Australia. Jen, thank you. Welcome this morning. Just explain to us, where is Kharg Island, what's there and why is it so important to Iran?
Yeah, look, thanks so much for having me on. So Kharg Island is really an island actually smaller than Sydney Airport. It's about 400 nautical miles into the Arabian Gulf. So to get in there, you'd have to go through the Strait of Hormuz. So it's in the northern Arabian Gulf. And it's about 25 kilometres from the Iranian mainland. And as you've mentioned this morning already, it is where 90% of Iran's oil is exported from. They do have some ports outside of the Strait of Hormuz where they can export oil from, but they can't take the big deep-hulled tankers that Kharg Island can. So it is quite strategic for those reasons.
So as to Donald Trump's latest threats, blowing up Kharg Island amongst them, what are your thoughts on that? What do you make of it?
Yeah, look, I think this is highly unlikely. I wouldn't say it's off the cards, but I guess we need to, when President Trump makes these statements, we need to kind of work out whether he's making them out of frustration, whether it's part of a strategic communications campaign to have a feint, to focus the world media on something else, which he does manage to achieve, or whether this is a feasible military plan. Now, the idea of it blowing up Kharg Island, that would have a significant impact on both oil prices and oil flow. In fact, what we saw about 3 weeks ago was the US actually reduced their sanctions on Iran's export of oil because they were concerned about oil making it into the global economy. Now, that sounds counterproductive because they're at war with Iran. But that is what they've done. So it would be surprising that they would blow up Kharg Island. There are other ways to solve that problem. They could have a naval blockade in the Indian Ocean and start intercepting the Iranian oil tankers that are still going through the strait and seizing them. That is certainly what I would do. They could also look at putting sea mines around Kharg Island or targeting some of the ships near Kharg Island. So there's a number of ways to achieve the same effect without having such a dramatic impact on both oil globally, but also on Iran's economy. So for those reasons, I think it is unlikely.
And how damaging would an escalation going after energy assets be for Iran?
Well, look, we do know that Iran's main economic lifeline is its oil assets, figures around 40% of its GDP. We know that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is one of Iran's two militaries, gets a lot of its funding from oil. So certainly it would be dangerous in terms of forcing or encouraging Iran to retaliate against further oil infrastructure across the Gulf. We saw that a couple of weeks ago when we saw the Israeli attack on the South Pars gas field. We then saw an Iranian attack on Ras Laffan, which is one of the world's biggest gas fields in Qatar. So that would be a dangerous move. There's also been, of course, a lot of discussion about whether the US would not destroy Kharg Island, but would militarily seize it with amphibious forces. And there seems to be a lot of focus on this. Again, I think, look, is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? I would say no. To get those amphibious forces in by sea to undertake an amphibious invasion, you need to sail them through the Strait of Hormuz, which is dangerous. You then need to invade that island knowing that you don't have complete air control because Iran is still managing to fire significant numbers of missiles and drones. Once you've done that, you then need to hold an island 25 kilometres from Iran's coast with your forces constantly being attacked by drones. All of this seems unlikely, and even if they did do that, would that be enough to force Iran to the table, especially given President Trump is saying Iran is discussing now? So potentially this is more of a aim by the US president to get the world's media and to get Iran focused on Kharg Island, when in fact they have other plans of how they're going to use those ground forces. OK, so you are suggesting here this is all a distraction on the part of the US? Look, I think it's certainly possible. We've seen that before. If you remember in the 12-day war last year, we saw President Trump say that he wouldn't strike Iran, and then they did that weekend. So it is possible. Again, It is such a difficult military operation to take Kharg Island. It's well inside the Arabian Gulf. It's very close to the Iranian mainland. And from a military objective, it doesn't actually achieve much. They've taken out most of the military capabilities on that island. Yes, clearly it puts pressure economically on Iran, but there are in fact other ways to do that. And I mentioned before, start seizing Iran's tankers that have been going out through the strait across the Indian Ocean, predominantly to places like China. They could do that. So potentially it is a feint. It's very clear that the US are building up ground forces in the region. We saw the USS Tripoli, which is a Marine Expeditionary Unit, arrive over the weekend. The USS Boxer is on its way as well. And that is very much to give the president options. But there are a range of things they could do.
Jen Parker, Adjunct Professor with the Defence and Security Institute at the University of WA. Great to get your insights on this. Thank you.
Thanks so much.